Talk about a full day. First, Donald Trump buddy-buddy with the Mexican president. Just hours later, he talked about having the same guy pay for the wall, and he sounded even more hardline on immigration than a year ago. Trump dominating the news cycle. The question is, did he help himself? Then, will WikiLeaks become a factor in the presidential election? It's already hacked the Democratic Party, and now its founder, Julian Assange, he's trashing Hillary Clinton. Also, will Anthony Weiner's ill-advised photo, just the latest, I grant you, with his young son land him in trouble with the law? We will bring you the very latest twists and turns in this very sad saga. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you for spending part of your Thursday night with us. The days, they're getting shorter and the race getting tighter. Election day getting closer. The big day now, just 67 days away. We have some brand new polling out. Fox shows Hillary with a 6-point lead in a two-way race. That's down from double digits that she enjoyed after the Democratic convention. Now, that's the national poll. When you take a look, though, at polls in those pivotal swing states here, Hillary, she leads in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Florida. Trump, he's trying to turn those numbers around. And yesterday, he focused on doing so by talking about the issue or the topic, you can argue, that it gave his candidacy prominence from the jump, and that's immigration. But the question is, will his visit to Mexico and his subsequent speech actually help his cause? This morning, Donald Trump back on the campaign trail after a day of laying out his plan on immigration. Speaking this morning before the American Legion, he promised to promote patriotism in schools.
We want young Americans to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. In addition to teaching respect for the flag, we also have to make sure we give our military the tools they need to defend that flag.
Last night in Phoenix, the GOP nominee put to rest any notion that he was softening on immigration with tough talk on his signature issue.
We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for the wall.
There was no shift or moderation in his position.
Day one, my first hour in office, those people are gone. Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero. I am going to create a new special deportation task force.
But after his meeting with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, Trump was restrained.
It's been a tremendous honor, and I call you a friend. Thank you.
Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine called Trump's Mexico visit yesterday a diplomatic embarrassment, chiding Trump for not addressing who would pay for his biggest foreign policy proposal.
He's been talking for a year about we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And what, he forgets suddenly to bring it up?
All right, let's bring in our panel to get into this. Richard Brodsky is a former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, and a man full of love, bourgeois. To his left, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. And we're joined very happily by Democratic New Jersey Congressman Steve Rothman, and also Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Guys, thank you. Let's jump right into the Donald yesterday. I haven't said this often, Steve, but I think overall it was a good day for him. He looked statesman-like, if you will, standing on the same stage with the Mexican president. Still don't know why the Mexican president did it. Does he seem confused, depending on the audience he speaks to? Two totally different messages, one in Mexico and one in Arizona. But nonetheless, he dominated the news cycle again yesterday, but kind of on his own terms. Did yesterday help him, or did it reinforce that depending on who he's talking to, he's going to have a totally different answer? It depends on forget about the day, the hour.
Well, Richard, I think it depends on what his goal was. If his goal was to dominate the news cycle, you're right, he surely did. But if his goal was to positively change people's minds, I think he failed. He goes to Mexico, and as he's leaving, the Mexican president says, oh, by the way, I told Mr. Trump we're not paying for that wall. Then Mr. Trump goes the same day to Arizona, and instead of softening on immigration, by the way, which 77% of Americans want, a comprehensive immigration reform pathway to citizenship, 77% want it, he doubles down on his, if you're here illegally, you are subject to deportation. That's 11 million people, he says, are subject to deportation, which 77% of the American people don't want.
And Andrew, I understood he put himself in a box. We talked about this last night before the speech in Arizona. We didn't know where he was going to go. For 14 months, he's made it clear that the wall and the deportation were the two things that he never equivocated on. You can argue that's how he flushed a lot of guys from the stage when it was 17 in the primary to begin with. But I didn't think he had to go as far as he went last night. He can't pivot back again, can he? I mean, this is it from now until November, that they're all going home and I'm building the wall and that guy's still going to pay for it.
It's all tough talk with no details and no specifics to give him enough wiggle room to do whatever he wants to down the road. Well, we'll work out how we're going to deport all these people at a later time. Look, I thought he did well in the news cycle if you measure that by watching it with the sound muted, because one of the big strikes on Donald Trump, yeah, you could argue that maybe he looked a little presidential standing next to the Mexican president, and maybe he didn't because his body language was whatever, but one of the big strikes on him so far has been that he'll say anything to anybody and he'll change what he says depending on the room that he's in. And we got a crystal clear example of that yesterday. Within hours, he's talking in diplomatic terms with the Mexican president, and then he comes back in Arizona and basically is trashing any movement on these border issues and on immigration. So for anybody who's actually listening to what he said, I thought he did a terrible job yesterday.
You know, Rich, we always debate about how much the American or the voting public really knows or cares, or if they just want to have a picture of the person in their mind before they go in there and they decide who they're going to vote for. Do you think yesterday they got the idea that this guy, he's saying two completely different things, or no?
Most people got what they wanted to get out of it, which is not a new phenomenon. But look, it wasn't a bad idea. This was like having the Patriots game plan drawn up by Joe Belichick, and then having Geno Smith at quarterback instead of Tom Brady.
Bill Belichick, but you were doing
Yeah, well, one of those guys.
Yeah.
His brother.
Yeah.
Did you know his brother?
Joe.
His
Yeah,
brother.
no, I didn't.
Joe Belichick. It was Joe Pisarcik was the bad quarterback.
Keep going. You're totally going a random
At
tangent.
any
Thank
rate,
you.
You had a fairly decent pivot on an issue. You had a fairly decent photo op, and then he does what is hurting him in the polls. He becomes personally unattractive. And so do you measure the change in position, the same position? Do you measure the hair? Do you measure the outrageous things he says? It's over.
I don't know about that. To be fair to Dominic, you look at the numbers and at the polls off the top, he's still not making up ground where he needs to make up ground. Those are those swing states. In a funny way, without getting too much into the numbers, it is tightening, and there's enough polls to show that there's something there, that it's tightening. However, the pathway he has is much tougher than a Democrat's going to have, and he hasn't made up ground in the states he's got to win. But besides that, I said it, I thought yesterday, compared to certainly the last 3 weeks, was a better day for him. But where he went last night, it's like he's still trying to convince the base that he's one of them. And I don't think he moved anybody in the middle that he needs to move if he's going to win yesterday, because he just confirmed all the suspicions everybody had of him.
Richard, what I really think what happened yesterday is that he hoodwinked the American people. I really believe that. His team put out this message of, oh, he's softening on immigration. He's softening. And thus, the relevance of last night. What I'm offended at personally, I know you guys think I'm a little nuts here. I'm offended that this was billed. If you watched any of the cable channels, it was billed from 7 o'clock on as almost a State of the Union address. The last time I checked, Donald Trump is not elected to anything. The guy who is a buffoon and a clown, let's call it for what it is. I'm not talking personally now or personal relationship. He's a buffoon and he's a clown. But he's an excellent showman. And Hillary Clinton, I'm telling you guys, is in serious, serious trouble. Who would ever think that Hillary Clinton would be the backstory to a Donald Trump? And that's exactly what happened yesterday.
Well, we've had the last year of evidence to say that if anything else, he can command a front page headline. But I'm still struggling with, they both got high negatives. She's not going to be able to run out the clock on this thing, as we're going to get into. There's a lot of stories coming down the pike here that she's going to have to answer. But I think Donald Trump's going to have a challenge on September 26th when they got to stand on a stage, and assuming the poll zone change, there's only going to be 2 of them. And he's going to have to answer questions, and there have to be about substance and policy. At the end, there's a reason, and I know Dom's going to say, and maybe he's right, that nobody cares that national security leaders say you can't trust this guy, even from Republican administrations. Nobody cares. He's going to say that top Republican leaders don't want to even be within an area code of this guy because they find him dangerous. Or up and down the line, people of substance who know you can't give this guy the launch codes, right? But you can't take every position on every issue without getting caught. I think he's going to get exposed, if he hasn't already, to a lot of people. No?
I agree with you that he didn't help himself last night when he doubled down on his anti-immigrant policies. And by the way, the immigration rate from our southern border, the illegal immigration rate, is the lowest today than it's been in 44 years. But Hillary Clinton, as Dominic suggests, is not out of the woods. She could fail at the debate. Donald Trump is a master entertainer, and he can be charming. He's dangerous and I don't think very bright, but he can be charming, and he could beat her in the debates. Something else could come out about one of the emails, or something else could come out about the Clinton Foundation activities.
Yep.
And by the way, in my opinion, they ought to close that foundation or transfer it to another entity, get Bill out of there, and get Chelsea out of there.
But back to what you were saying about yesterday in immigration, I think you're exactly right. I think he went back to his same old hardline policies, and who exactly does that help him win over? The people who are already supporting Donald Trump, they heard what they wanted to hear, but that's only 39 to 42% of the voting bloc based on the polls right now.
Already lost him a number of the conservative, Republican, Latino people who are on stage.
And I think you're going to motivate him to vote even more than
a whole bunch of them have said they're
before the day
withdrawing their
started.
support of Trump.
And for anybody who's in the middle or anybody who's undecided, seeing the flip-flop or seeing the same old thing, there was a reason that they're undecided. So clearly, what he's been saying up until now about immigration hasn't been ringing the bell for them. So repeating it yesterday isn't going to get them on board his campaign. And the waffling, the going back and forth, that's not going to help him get votes either.
And I'll tell you only one thing. I think we can agree at least on this. The biggest loser yesterday, the Mexican president. What in God's name was he thinking of sharing the stage? He's being pillared right now, coast to coast in Mexico. All right. Hillary Clinton, as we know, going after Trump. But it could be 2 against 1. We're going to tell you how Julian Assange and WikiLeaks could be maybe the biggest threat to Hillary's campaign. We'll talk about that after this.